Guys, if I met last year, it's a pleasure to see everybody again. And if not, welcome all to all the new faces. I am ecstatic to be back here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. But yeah, I've known Susan since I was 13, I want to say. So time is really flying, but it's nice to see this community stay together. And even if we're from afar, it's impressive to see everybody get on the Zoom call. It's very cool to see all the faces at once. So just a pre-note to the presentation as I go. It's going to be given in twofold. And I really do encourage you guys to pause and ask questions as I go. I will take like a concerted effort to stop after each slide. A lot of what I'm going to go into is data, and it seems to be a good theme, and that's what's important. But I do encourage you guys to ask these questions. I know this area is always changing, and it can seem like an uphill battle, or sometimes very much kind of a dark cloud. So I want to make that as clear as possible as we go about. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Are you guys able to see? Can I just take? I'm able to see you guys. I'm just going to take your nods as a thumbs up. Yes, everybody can see. Awesome. Cool. So here today, I just a little bit about me. I'm going to talk. I'll walk through the agenda, but really here to cover the power of social media and advocacy through COVID 2020 and beyond. And I did give a presentation on this last year during 2019. A lot has changed in the world, if to say the least. I was just talking to somebody about how we had the fires in Australia, and that seems like years ago, and it's been like 6 months. But yeah, we'll definitely go through a lot of what's changed. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the platforms like I did last year. Last year, just for some context, I talked a lot about what Facebook was, what Twitter is. This year, I am catering this conversation a lot more around how do we use these platforms that we both have some idea of what they are, to create the best form of strategy to get to your consumer, get to your end user, if you will. And I'll talk about where everybody is today. And then I'll kind of go lastly into advocacy and the ways we're seeing it being used. So that will kind of take me through the agenda real quick. Again, a quick introduction, social media during this period, advocacy, am I using these tools in the right way? Am I reaching the audience? And then, Q&A at the end, ask the millennial all the questions you'd like. So again, this is meant to be broken up in two, and we'll carry it away from there. So a little bit about myself real quick for the group. I am a pediatric cancer survivor of cutaneous T-cell lymphoma of now probably more than 10 years. That must have been from last year, but I lose track, which is a very exciting sign on my end. Still going through UVA, UVB light therapy, so I can definitely relate to folks who are either dealing with that struggle or have had to face it at a very early age. I got diagnosed at 12 or 13, and with stage 3B. So I was at a very, very serious and aggressive form of lymphoma. I am a member of the Cancer Survivor Network here, working with Susan. Currently work at DoorDash, which I'm sure most of you have either become familiar with now, but down in Houston, or then became familiar with because of COVID. It's a pretty big one as far as food delivery. And previous experiences outside of that, I worked at Uber for a year and a half, and the NFL prior to that, and studied international relations and economics at Duke University. So definitely have a good background in tech, use social media quite a bit. Yeah, just outside passions for myself was I'm an avid marathon runner. So that's just a little bit about me. Just to give you guys some perspective, I wanted to show you guys that life wasn't always so great and wasn't always so smiling. As you can see in these pictures here, my cheek has my first patch ever of what was to become my cancer. And then I went through over a year of chemotherapy with my wig and no eyebrows. So definitely have gone and seen the whole realm, and I want you guys to know that as I talk about these things, it's a personal matter to me and something I truly do relate to. But as Susan mentioned, it's never been something that stopped me. I definitely have done a lot in the space in advocacy work, whether it be to raise money for lymphoma programs. I got a letter from Obama actually after giving a speech at my first conference with Susan for the Voices conference. So got a speed letter from our president, which was awesome. 20 elections coming up. I'll stop there. Yeah, so definitely have some experience and know where we're going. But just wanted to give you guys that little bit of background about me before I move into the social media bit. So I'm here to talk about social media, not about myself. How are people communicating today through COVID? What has this changed and what's effective? And broadly, I just always start here, which is like, hey, like, let's just make sure we're on the same page as to what social media is, and the way I'm going to go ahead about defining it before we go down the pillar of saying like, hey, like, I expect all of you to know. So social media is absolutely a way for people to communicate and interact online. That whether that be any of these facilities you've seen here, this doesn't have TikTok per se, but I do like this view to give you an idea of just a good bit of like what people are using which platform for. Over the past decade or so, we've absolutely seen this skyrocket. And again, the reason we call it social media is, again, we are just engaging in social conversations, interactions with folks through these different platforms over the time. And I think the last thing to really note here is during COVID, we've seen a dramatic spike in the use of social media and the power it holds and the responsibilities brands have to engage. There is no longer an opportunity like last year to say, oh, you may have that personal touch point. That no longer really exists because we can't physically be around each other. We need to find ways to engage socially. You owe that responsibility to your group. And I think that has really pushed the agenda of making this, again, the forefront of communication. So on the right here, I just wanted to kind of high level talk about the 5 or 6 big buckets we see today. At least the couple that I'm going to focus a little more of the conversation around, or at least Twitter, which again is a bit of a microblogging site. If everyone's, I'm sure most of you are familiar by now, but again, need to level set. So Twitter is a bit one where you kind of get to send out a small message online. Both organizations, people of interest, I'm sure we all know are soon to hopefully not be president. Mr. Trump tweets all the time, but it's a way for him to reach communities, or anyone rather, to reach their communities in small bits. Facebook is your form of a social infrastructure. Show of hands, because I can see you all. How many of you guys have a Facebook or know what I'm talking about when I see Facebook? And I can see, yep, okay. Alan, I see Lisa, Eliza. Okay, perfect. We know what Facebook is. Instagram, thumbs up. You guys, if you can see on the bottom, you can give me a reaction. If you give me a thumbs up, that means I'll know what you guys are talking about. I'm seeing lots of thumbs. Cool. We know Instagram, Snapchat, I'm going to see continual thumbs. And then LinkedIn is the last one, really a professional network, right? Same thing as kind of Facebook. But rather, all of these are forms of social media that people use to interact. COVID has certainly spiked the use of all of these. Before I move on, any questions on this slide regarding just the use of social media?
Anton, this is Susan. I don't have a question, but can you make your slides, make it show up the full screen rather than being in this?
Let me try. I was having issues with that a moment ago, even me having issues with this. Give me a second. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. Bam, there you go.
Thank you. That's better.
You're welcome. Okay. So moving on a bit. So the next 6 slides or so I'm going to talk about are really just to the theme that was just presented by Fergen, but it's really around data. And why this is important to me is I want to show you guys, especially in like the world that we understand today, like we have these facilities, we have these platforms, they're great. How do I actually use them and leverage them in the right way? And I think that really just starts by knowing exactly what the consumer behavior is doing, right? And this is from Hootsuite. It's a wonderful resource, by the way. I would encourage you all to kind of go ahead and look at their data online. They present a state of social media rather every single year, where they're actually monitoring all these trends worldwide. So this is a global index, right? And that to me is super important, because as we know, every single market that you may interact with will be different, right? The API market or the Asian market's very different than the domestic market. They have different platforms, but the shifts in understanding the way people use these platforms, no matter where they are, is indicative of maybe the way you kind of cater social media to your direct audience. So first and foremost, we wanted to talk about the increase in online and digital activities, right? What we're learning from just at least here is that inevitably people are spending more time on their phones now than ever before. Not only, I mean, sure, we all have that great idea, and I'm looking around the room that we're going to sit at home for a while and maybe read a book for a bit, and maybe, you clean your room for a while, but at the end of the day, like your phone has now become the place that you are now interacting and engaging with everybody. For example, we'd be having this meeting in person. Now we are on our computers. As a result, you're engaging with me. This is being monitored somewhere as like a tracking as far as like minutes being used. So all of your engagement is now being moved to social media. Now we're seeing that in the data here as well. A couple points that like are interesting to me on this one are, hey, spending longer use on social media and spending longer on messaging services. These 2 points are particularly interesting as you think about reaching out and connecting with your end user, right? Or your end patient, whoever that may be. Really because you need to understand that like no longer is like, there's an opportunity to get personal. And we'll talk about that via like a text message, right? The amount of companies that now are sending a text saying, oh, hey, how are you doing? Or like, hey, here's an update from COVID. Or, hey, you're updating your Instagram page as now your source of truth, is the future of how you get to your consumer, right? No longer is it, oh, let me send a piece of mail. The world changes overnight. We know that. The fastest way to get to someone, now we know, is also on your phone. And what this is also telling you is more than ever, people are on their phone or on their social media all moments of the day. So I want us to keep that kind of context in mind as we talk more about the strategies that we do. Any questions on just the increase in online and digital activities? Awesome. So a little bit more on just like quickly, I'll go over this, spending time on overall devices. We're seeing, again, a massive amount of increase on your phone and your computer, right? So this means like, if we think about the conversation around the apps that we use and the ways we get to social networks of folks, think about the fact that they're sitting on their phone and they're messaging all the time, or think about that if somebody's on the laptop like we are all on right now, and likely at some point after whether this presentation's over or not, we're all gonna hop onto Facebook. Or, hey, we're going to hop onto Instagram real quick or Twitter and read what's going on. I think having that show, as far as like, especially in that age range of 16 to 64, that's a pretty wide range. You're seeing more and more engagement with those things as well. So I think that's the real call out. People are still wanting to be mobile, but people are still spending more and more time on the computer, and they're spending more and more time just streaming and being in front of forms of entertainment and social media. So the interesting thing that we've been seeing outside of this is like, not only is this an increased lift in the past, say, just from this period of time, but there are a lot of people who maybe were scared to make the jump into social media, or just rather the new forms of media. Show of hands if you guys were like, this was when you started Zoom, it was a little scary for the first time. Yeah, I know for like a lot of us, not meeting in person was absolutely terrifying. But it seems that now, let me ask you guys this, just how many of you, now that you've done a Zoom, actually find it to be pretty useful? You can use your reaction to show me if you do. Thumbs up, right? I would assume, yep, I see it from Tina, Divya, Lee, I see it, Van, okay, great, yep. So a lot of you folks, Maya, thank you. Now that you've actually kind of used the initial service, recognize the value and the lift of having Zoom available. So what this allows us to understand is no longer will it be, I don't think when the world goes back to normal, whenever that is, and I agree with Susan, it may be a while, that we're gonna have people who never really go back, even though we'll go back in some sense, but we'll never lose the ability to understand that technology will be a way for us to do all these things. And that in itself is pretty exciting. So I think when you think about your end user and you think about getting social media out there, understand that people are learning how to use Zoom for the first time, but once they understand how it works, this will be the future of way people engage, right? And you can still be personal in that way. You can still find ways to give that feel, but it means that like you're gonna have to get creative with your strategies, but it's gonna be something that can be sustained. And this is like one of the most interesting slides to me. This shows the percentage of increased users that are on social media by age range. And you would suspect the younger folks, as they get on their first phone, to have a pretty high lift. But it's also interesting to see that almost 32% of people at the age globally of the age of 55 to 64 are increasing their use of social media. So when you hear, oh, I'm too old for that, Absolutely not true. We're all on Zoom right now together. We're all, are going to be on a Facebook group and sharing messages later. We're all going to be tweeting at each other later. There is no reason to say that, hey, look, no, there's a big group of people who are absorbing this behavior, doing it more often than not, and are engaging consistently and will probably never go back, right? And that's the story I want you to understand here. Like, Zoom is not here to disappear. Zoom is not here to just solve the problem. Zoom is a real good technology that allows us, for example, to really engage in a new way so that we don't have to travel all the time and hop on a plane. And that might be something we see in the future. So really kind of just wanting to outline those statistics there. And then I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit here now more into like what this has meant for companies. But any questions about the user before I move forward?
I'm just curious, why do you leave out age 64 and older?
Yeah, it's a good question. Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate it. This is, again, this is my data resource is only coming up to 64. I can definitely tune back and see if I can get to an older range. I apologize. That's just not something I had scoped for. But yeah, that's a good call out. Note to Lisa, there it is. I will get back to you for sure. Thank you. Awesome. So the last bit here, and this is more on the kind of content that people are looking for. I found this interesting as well as we think about like how you get to your end user. A lot of folks we're seeing a lot more trends up in do it by yourself or DIY. And that's something I wanted to spend a little more time talking about. Now, no longer do you want to call your plumber to fix something, or perhaps it's, hey, my TV went out, usually call someone, but people are acting, the risk is real, right? You don't need someone coming in to your house if you don't need to, especially when you have these resources online. And I think the real message that I wanted from that top base is that 35% increase and 30% increase of repeat of classic TV shows have gone up, and how-to tutorials and videos has also increased. So both of those are telling me that, hey, people want to watch what they haven't seen in a while, but also people really want to learn how to do things on their own, and they're using YouTube to do it, right? Or they're using these social media channels for you to kind of teach, right? And I think that that's a really important concept that we can all do, more of. Be personable in like your messaging, but also be a teacher online, right? Share that video, share that ability like I'm doing right now. Like if we record this and share, this can be used exponentially. I don't have to be here to teach this. And people are finding this useful at home while they're sitting around on their phone all the time. So that's something else I wanted to call out just as far as the types of content people are looking for these days while they're sitting on their phone or Facebook and engaged more than ever on their phones and their laptops. I think I can skip here. I think the last one I wanted to really talk about, again, sorry, Lisa, I don't have that last slide there for you, but it's just an increased detail of social media use. Again, we're seeing it across the board. Everyone's picking up the pace and everyone's spending more time on it. That's a story I think we all know now by every bracket, but I can definitely tune back a little bit more on the age range and get you guys a little more information there. So turning the conversation here a little bit more broadly, like, okay, great, now I understand my user. How do I get to understand the impact on advertising? Like, how are companies, what are they doing differently now? And I think this has been a really interesting kind of field point between wave 1 and wave 2, which is showing it like right as COVID hit to like really when we were all kind of now at stay at home. And what we're learning is that like, hey, look, a lot of companies are pulling back and recognizing that there is a real pandemic here and it's not the time to just do things as normal, right? You're seeing a shift of almost 64% of companies that were measured held back a campaign from launching until later in the year. They stopped and pulled out a campaign. Almost half of the companies measured here pulled out of a campaign mid-flight. They either canceled the campaign completely. There's a huge rise within just weeks. And then you look at that last one, adjusted a media type or budget around the media types was a bit of a shift up in just a week's time, right? Which is telling you that, hey, look, acknowledging COVID and switching your strategy to be cognizant of this effort is absolutely what needs to be done, right? Understand that your user is on the phone and they're absorbing this material this way. This is what they're interested in, how-tos and things like that. And don't just do what you've been doing, right? This is the time where you need to change and you have to. And I think we're seeing it across brands. Like, so a lot of brands are saying, hey, you know what? Almost none are saying we're making no change or zero changes to our strategy at all, right? I mean, our lives have changed. We need to change with it. Some are saying, you know, we're tweaking our focus and messaging moderately, and that's a big one. And then there's certain brands where their business is flipped upside down, so they need to change everything, right? But to the most part, what I want to focus in is that middle one, where 45% of these brands said that they're able to tweak their focus and messaging moderately. And I think that's an ability that everybody in this room has to do and will be capable of doing just by kind of executing a couple steps that I'm about to go into. So enough charts and enough data for me now. I'm going to go into a bit of a qualitative strategy. Any questions about the data I showed before I move on? Awesome. I will take your silence as a vote of confidence. I appreciate that from all of you guys. Thank you. Great. So the first part I want to talk about is kind of the social media strategy and acknowledging the situation. And this is like the second bit of this whole thing. And then we'll talk a little bit about overall best practices, shifting content strategy, and examples. So acknowledging the situation. Where are we at today based on all we talked about? What's next, and what does this really mean? Currently, like a couple stats that I don't want to get too much into details of all of them. Facebook is now seeing a 70% increase in usage in all its apps. So that's Instagram and WhatsApp across the board. That is going to be the biggest social media platform. 43% of users are saying that social media stated they'd use Instagram more if they were confined in their homes. So if they're at home, people are going to Instagram for their information. News consumption through social media rose 9% in just the past 3 months alone, and it's continuing to go up. That's just the April data. So I want that one to really sit at home, like a 10% rise in social media for news consumption. The ability for an Instagram to now say, I'm not only your form of social media, I am also the end all media mechanism where you're getting all your political information, you're getting information about your community, you're getting information about COVID through the app itself. And the last bit, and I wanted to kind of mention this is a different one, but TikTok's been the world's most downloaded app in the past 3 months, and in any 3-month period. And that's saying that, hey, look, people are looking for new ways ever to get in touch and feel connected to people. So with these in mind, we need to acknowledge that this is the way that social media is kind of being connected, that we also recognize brands are shifting moderately, but this is where everyone's going, and they're actually getting news through social media as well. And I kind of wanted to show you guys.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, absolutely.
On that last slide, you talked about the increase in getting news through social media. Can you just make a comment about whether, what the downfalls to that are?
Absolutely. I mean, there are a couple of good, interesting things here, guys. Like it's Instagram, Facebook, all of those are catering an algorithm to you based on preferences and based on likes, right? And like based on your interests, whether that be things you like on Facebook, whether that be the groups you're a part of. It has a system, essentially an algorithm in the back end, which is taking all those data points in mind. Things you're texting, they own WhatsApp, things you like on Facebook, and they are started, say for Instagram is that example. And as a result, like they want to cater you the most relevant news to you, right? But that means that algorithm has bias, inevitably, right? It's going to show you certain things that you may want or may not want. And the fact of the matter is, like any news station, we know inherently, like Fox is a conservative news station, CNN may lean a little bit more left. We can all agree to that, right? But that means Instagram is also starting to develop certain biases, but they're based on your own expectations and your own premise. So what this is telling you is that now more than ever, people are turning to social media as the source of truth for news. So that when you, like, if they follow you, say they follow your account, your Instagram account, your so like say for instance, the cancer survivor page, we've got to take that owner and take that bias to action to be the best about giving truthful information, right? Everyone's looking for these things to be the source of truth, and the algorithms in the back end are really feeding you what you want. But you can take it upon yourself as a leader of an org that has developed a community, developed a following, to be the one to say, hey, this is the information we want to give out about COVID, right? And we'll talk a little bit more at the end about how advocacy groups are doing this specifically, how are they getting their data points out there, but they're taking that social responsibility onto themselves. Awesome. I'll keep going here. So I want to talk a little bit here about acknowledging that situation and the increase in responsibility amidst the social media platforms. This is just an example of how like Facebook and Instagram are trying in their best ways to acknowledge that they are a mechanism of and a source of news. And here are just two quick visual examples of like what they're doing. Now, granted, we know that a lot of these social media platforms have been in the news because they haven't been able to like withstand bias from either side. But one thing we can all agree to is that we should all be wearing a mask. And on the right here, you'll see an example of exactly ways that Facebook and these different accounts are embedding these processes around health as their forms of social responsibility. And a couple other points I wanted to make that I thought Instagram did a really good job of that you guys can be doing on your own page too. They're including more educational resources around Instagram, adding stickers to promote accurate information. So that's like what you see right over here. Clicking to find out more from the CDC, removing COVID accounts from recommendations unless they're credible health organizations. That's a huge change that they've made in the past year. No longer are you just able to say, oh, get a COVID test from this place and pay, $90 copay. They're actually trying to work very hard to verify that because they know they have that responsibility. They're rolling out forms of donations, and they're showing ways that you can even browse and video chat with friends on Instagram to make that feeling of more connection. So I want that to be clear as we talk about like, hey, that social responsibility is there, but they're also finding ways for you to engage more because they want you on their platform a bit more too. And that's what we talked a little bit more about, increased in phone usage. It's exactly how we're seeing it, right? Instagram throws this new feature. Hey, you can video chat with me while we go through Instagram together. We're spending more time on the platform. But that also means they have a responsibility to keep you informed and make sure they're, without bias, telling you what is best for the world. So that's just an example of Facebook and Instagram and how they're doing it. Any questions here, guys? Okay. I like being in the room. This is the one thing, guys, where I like being in the room. I can read you guys and we can engage a little more, but I'm doing my best with Zoom. So increased, one more I did want to really talk about was Twitter. I really found their social media strategy and like their engagement strategy and responsibility to be very important. And again, acknowledging the situation is the key here, guys. Recognize that COVID has changed everything. Recognize in your own social ways, you will also need to change and acknowledge that. So what they've done is created a couple different ways for you to find more knowledgeable information, helping people. They've done this through several different features, but one is actually through their hashtag of COVID-19. They're verifying a lot of the different resources through that. It's become a homepage. They're empowering research of COVID on Twitter. So they're utilizing this base and network of folks to create the most reputable source by whether that be, hey, boots on the ground, we're having a really hard time at this Houston hospital, and gathering all that and making sure they can turn that into maybe a dashboard or a form of communication outbound so everybody knows what's going on. And then just like making sure everyone's staying safe, just making sure people know where hotspots are, things along those lines, using that power of saying, hey, we got millions and millions and millions of people coming to us every day. How are we helping drive that conversation around keeping everybody safe? Because they understand and they acknowledge the situation and accept that responsibility of being such a big player. Awesome. So I think there are a couple real points that I want you guys to take away from that acknowledgement of the situation that I just showed you. Right now, it really is the most important time to show your consumers, your end users, rather, that you're listening and acknowledging the situation seriously. On your page saying, hey, look, we're not used to this, right? Being vulnerable, saying this is, as everyone's used the word unprecedented. I know we've all used it at least 10 times since it started, but it is a very new time. And really letting your end users know that, hey, look, like we're adjusting accordingly. We're not going to be perfect. No one is. That will show that you really care and that you're like, hey, look, we're not going to put out our normal ads. We're not going to do things the normal way. Our normal way would be we're all together in Texas today, but we're not, right? And like that acknowledgement really shows that we care about the situation, but we care about the community as well. I think the next piece here is consumers will be listening carefully to see how you're reacting. By ignoring the COVID crisis, you'll result in your brand being perceived as tone deaf. And I agree. Like, hey, look, this is flipped people's lives upside down. You can't just say, oh, you know, we're going to continue to do the course as normal. That means you don't even think you've really felt it, to be honest. And you want to make sure your brand and however way you bring it out is perceived as saying we acknowledge that situation. And then the last bit here, consumers were already carefully evaluating brands for their companies, and actions leading up to COVID are only going to accelerate that trend. And what we mean by that is like, hey, look, if there was a reason you didn't want to get behind a company and they're not doing anything to help others during COVID, you certainly won't get behind them now, or you certainly will. And I think people are looking to see which companies were at the front and saying, you know what, go get behind us because we're really doing something about it. We're not just going to sit back and worry about the money we're making because people's lives are on the line. And I'll give you a couple examples of how that's shown in a little while, but a couple things to mention are Johnson J&J, Coke, AT&T, who really kind of gave back to communities, gave to hospitals quickly, whether that be in financial donations, whether that be in just actual product, whether that be PPE, things along those lines. They didn't recognize that, hey, you know, this is an opportunity for us to contribute back as opposed to step away. And I think that's really important in this situation. Step up, say you understand. I don't know how to fix it necessarily. No one really does. We don't know, but we're gonna work together to make that happen. So I think that is really the mechanism and the message you need to be portraying. So I'm going to talk about my own company because I like to brag about them for a minute here. And I don't know, just by like show of hands or thumbs, how many of you guys have actually heard of DoorDash before? The big food delivery app. Yes, I'm seeing some thumbs, yay, thumbs. I like thumbs, guys, cool. So I wanted to give a quick example of like how DoorDash, I thought, did a really nice job of acknowledging that this is exactly what we talked about, a very different time. We don't know how to do it right, but we're going to do everything we can to help. And a mechanism, granted, of course, like I don't expect everyone to go make a video, but at the end of this, I hope you'll get the sentiment that what we did is we actually reduced all our commissions, period, on any small business. So if I think it's under, like they have only one store, we reduced that commission to 0 for at least a couple months. Just let them run on the platform because we understood they need to stay open for us to work as well, but we need to work together. And I'll show you this video real quick so you guys get a sense.
Restaurants have always been there for you. A place to celebrate, to take a first date, to grab a meal between soccer practice and piano. And even though tables are empty at the moment, the kitchens are full, prepping everything so it's just right, keeping customers safe, and making the food as delicious as ever. They're still there for you. Now you can be there for them. While the doors may be closed, the kitchens are open for delivery.
And like with that example, and we think about just being genuine, acknowledging the situation, understanding that there isn't not necessarily a clear way out, but saying, you know, we're going to do our best to help. That is exactly what you can do in just a couple words, right? We obviously have a creative video, and I like that angle of sharing what we meant. And in that example, it'd say like, hey, look, like these are all your favorite spots that are local. And right now, these aren't places you can go, but they need you to help them. And we're going to help you get there to them, right? And I think that is the same thing that we all need to rely on each other during this period and make sure we're communicating via our social channels to everyone. Hey, we can't meet right now, but we're still going to make this happen, right? And I think that is the encompassing of the strategies you should take back. So any questions on this one before I move on? Sorry, I know I did a little humble brag about my own company, but I really did like the video. Awesome. So just a couple best practices, guys, that I think would really kind of help if you're starting to think about, hey, Anton, like want to talk a bit more about messaging, like what do I do now that I've seen this example? I think there are just a couple things that I really wanted to make sure were highlighted. It's a sensitive time. We all know that. We don't know what everyone's going through. It could be a job loss, a family member who's in the hospital. We might have people who are working on the front line. I think it's just important to be considerate. Vulnerability is key, right? Saying, hey, I don't know what everyone is, but you're there as a supportive angle. I would say anything related, and I'm not saying this applies to you guys per se, but anything related to kind of pushing sales or marketing, like having any form of a fun time right now, or like trying to say, hey, we got to do the next thing, is probably not the best time to be doing that right now, but rather just considering like we just did with our ads, right? Like that's an example of, hey, like we want you to continue to use DoorDash, but we're saying, hey, look, support your local business, and that's all we're asking for. So I'd say anything related to like, hey, I'm pushing more on you is just not the time right now. Thinking about the timing of your messaging. So, hey, like right now we are, it may be like the time of social injustice, and then that's what's really big in the news for the last couple of weeks. It's not necessarily the time you want to be pushing your campaign or saying like, hey, we want to get people to sign up for something. Think about everything that's happening. Is there a rising COVID in the area? Is there someone that, does your group have something happening? Take all those contexts and really think about the timing. Like I just said, social media is now becoming a news source. Like that is something I want you all to take away from this today. Like people are no longer going to CNN.com, NPR. I mean, yes, we all go to NPR. I would say, I'd hope you all do, but there are a target market of folks who are just on Facebook, and like, that's what they're going to use for news. And that's you might become their source of truth. Really think about that and let that sit. Like if that's the case, you want to make sure you're consistently updating with the newest and most relevant information, whether that be about office hours or resources that exist. We want to make sure that's all available. And then I think the last thing here is like, instead of like having an immediate call to action, or it's like buy right now, or like do this now, sign up now, think about the future, saying, hey, we're pulling this back, or we're going to do this out, and then think about next year. Give someone something to look forward to. And then the last thing is like I just said, really point 7. I don't know all the answers. I'll be honest. I don't know if like this will resonate with all of you, but I'm being true to what I think is the best strategy. And like, I hope you can see it coming from a genuine voice, right? And like, that is what everyone's looking for during this time. Be vulnerable, be yourself, be the brand, be the image that you want to be. And don't steer off and go into something that isn't really true to who you are. And that's what people are looking for, especially right now. So just kind of, I like this slide. It's from Ogilvy and Mather, which is an incredible brand company. And I love this one just as far as like something you guys can take away. Listen first, be sensitive, be transparent, adopt and rise, right? This will always be changing. Tomorrow, it's California today. Tomorrow, it could be a new state. The next day, it could be your own home. It could be somebody important to you. It could be for jobs. It could be anything. We don't know where the world's going. But what we do know is we can all be good listeners. We can all be good. We can take advice appropriately, and we can take and adopt our strategies based on what's happening in the world. These things are now, these social media platforms have given you all, everyone here, an opportunity to be super dynamic. You can go in and change your Facebook about page tomorrow. You can post a new tweet literally in seconds. You could take a picture, post it, or share something you heard in the news, or there's something you want to share out loud that you would even put in an email. Just kind of do that, right? And that's adapting your strategy to be as fluid as possible. And that's what really successful companies and other folks are doing to make sure they stay in tune with their users. And I think the last thing here really is just kind of thinking about shifting that strategy, right? And then we just kind of talked about it. Consumers, like I said, are spending more time online. That means you need to continue to adjust dynamically. That means also changing your social strategy dynamically, making sure everything's up to date. All those sources are solid. And more nowadays, guys, is more not about pushing new ideas, but just keeping everyone consistent and thinking maybe longer term about maybe something in the future. So really recognize that today the content you build should be keeping everyone informed. You are their source of truth. The people are looking to connect with others. People are looking for that sense of belonging, but they're also looking to that place now for news. And that is really like the point that needs to hit home. So 3 kind of last bits here on the focusing of your online community. Provide people with the most accurate information that you can. Communities are live and living. I really wanted that to be clear. Like every screen, every profile, like we're all human behind there. We all have a family or other people we connect with, especially even behind the screen right now. This would be a huge room of wonderful people. treat your online community the same way you would anyone like we would in person. Just because we're behind a screen doesn't mean you treat them any differently. It doesn't mean you get to say or hide behind anything else. And that also means you have that responsibility as a brand. Just because you've created the profile, let's say for a Facebook, means you also hold that responsibility to all these people. Like this presentation, I'm holding responsibility to share to all of you, and then you take this and run with it. So that's a tremendous feat, and I want you guys to understand that. And I think the last bit here is just really on and just kind of place yourself everywhere, and make sure you're kind of known among the channels, and that's kind of the last point here. So I think this will kind of wrap up my bit here, Susan, on social media strategy and just funny things I've been seeing online that I really appreciated. Some are live examples, some are online. Just kind of keep it light at the same time, guys, if you can acknowledge and be a news source. But like, if you take a look at that picture on the right, they put funny little ghosts in the chairs. I know like at baseball games now, people are putting like, as the baseball season just starts up, they're putting mannequins in there. There are certain people just putting up, just engaging surveys. People are really looking to continue to engage, right? And it is isolating being alone for so long or not seeing anyone, even if you didn't talk to people much outside, but like nice to know you can. So I think just finding ways and being that vulnerable, sharing what you feel like your audience should know, like that is the community you've created and they're all aligned to that already. So these are just some examples. I hope that kind of just covers the bit on the strategy of just like being genuine and recognizing you're a news source. And that kind of wraps it up as far as my social media strategy for now. So thank you.
Okay, great. So Anton's going to finish up in a little bit, but first we're going to take a quick break. So for those of you that have not already eaten all your snacks, you can take out your week 2 and eat your snack. We're going to give everybody a 10-minute break here. So if you can come back in 10 minutes, which is approximately, well, let's see, Central Time. What time is it out there in Central Time, guys? 2, about 2 o'clock right now, a little bit before 2. So if you can come back around 2:05, 2:08, we'll get started again with the first community highlight.
Right, ready when you are. Okay, awesome.
Take it away.
So turning it on back over here. Thank you guys. Hope you enjoyed some snacks. Really wanted to kind of shift this conversation in gear away from just social media broadly, but think about, hey, like, let's have a conversation here loosely about how advocacy and this is being used in the world that you guys are using today. Am I reaching the right audience? Am I using these tools in the best way possible? So kind of the role of social media and healthcare is the first thing I wanted to talk about. You guys are in a really unique position when it comes to the social presence that you definitely have. You're marketing a different need than just saying like, oh, go buy a Coca-Cola or go order from DoorDash, right? It really is representing a human necessity, something that where people need to relate and need to get information, and knowing that you guys are a news source out there today even lifts that responsibility. We all are aware that rising healthcare premiums and rising healthcare premiums lead to more anxiety. And that is not a conversation that's easy to be had, or like anything around like really healthcare is anxiety inducing. So just, I think what I want you to keep in mind from this piece is that social media will be a key component of how you practice and talk with patients and drive that genuine behavior, right? Like be that part of being vulnerable to yourself, being vulnerable to your audience, being true. It needs to be said of everything you do as well, especially because you're not marketing a brand or selling something like a product, right? The product you're selling is somebody's life and somebody's health. And we know the most important thing, like, and I'm sure by show of hands, how many times have we all been, and you can please raise your hand, been to a doctor where it's like, hey, doctor, whatever, or oncologist, whatever, just tell me what it is and be honest with me as to what the treatment schedule looks like, as opposed to beating around the bush. I'm going to show my hand because I know I've had that experience many times. I think we can all have related to that. And I think like when you talk about on social media about like where things stand, where the world as COVID is, like what your organization is doing about it, bring that same level of genuine nature and authenticity, right? I think that is so key. Sorry. So a couple stats here, just in the United States that pulled in the past year. Almost 1 in 2 adults in the United States suffer from a chronic condition. 1 in 3 patients are seeking social media out there for health information. I mean, that's massive. And that probably has gone up even in the past couple months as more people aren't being able to get to their primary healthcare doctors or able to get into the ER. They're having to use other resources because the beds and the hospital occupancy is being used for COVID right now. 40% of 2% of consumers view health-related reviews on social media. I mean, that's almost half. Like every other person in this room is going to go check you on Yelp or Google reviews. That's the reality of the world. And 32% of those social media users post in families about their health experiences. I want to say this because I know not all of us are maybe running hospitals per se, but like the point here that I'm trying to make is that you have a responsibility and the same engagement, right? The same sensitivity and that same authenticity is absolutely key to driving, to get in for going forward, right? Like in creating your strategy. Remember, the users for healthcare, the way that you're being viewed in the social lens is the same as any other brand, and that people are really using it the same way. People are coming into that social strategy from Coca-Cola, and they're going to view you the same way, but they're putting you in a different lens because you are talking about their health, talking about their lives, and that's super important. A couple more stats here on the bottom. 29% of patients viewing information on social media look to other patients' experiences. How many, I mean, show of hands here again, or thumbs, how many of you talk to, how many of you guys have been referenced to a doctor? I think that's all of us, because I know personally, yep, I'm seeing hands across the board. We've all been referenced to a different oncologist. And why do we go there? Because we trust what we see, and we trust that if Susan were to give me an oncologist, I trust her to take care of my health, right? And I would say the same of Liza if I were to pass somebody on to her. Because at the end of the day, this is a trust network. And in the same nowadays that now we can't maybe connect in that personal way, but we're looking to end the internet as the source of truth, like we just said. This is the way people are going to connect going forward. So the way you build that for yourself and your social media strategy is being genuine and authentic and creating a real experience for everyone in everything you do. Because that's what will resonate. Oh, when I think of this, survivor network, I'm thinking of this. Or I think of this breast case, cancer group, I think of that. Not a group that's trying to sell me new products or something very corporate, right? Get away from that and get to your true voice. And then I think the last kind of stat here, social media users looking for healthcare related videos and images are almost at 25, a quarter of the people actually going online. People want to see and people want to feel their experience. They want to read about it. They want to feel trusted. They also want to see that there are other people on the other side. And I don't mean it from like the standpoint of making it, but like you're talking to a real doctor. You're not going to sit in a waiting room all day. Or if you are, that it seems comfortable, and then, showing more the better. I mean, I don't know how many of you go on Google before not going to a restaurant and you take a look at the images, right? Or like you look at what you're buying. And it's the same idea here. So my point on this slide is like, as we think about taking what we've learned in social media and applying it into advocacy and work, there is a very strong responsibility that you apply it the same way any other brand does. And in fact, you have to probably take it to another level, because you're talking about someone's health as opposed to somebody's beverage of choice or meat of choice or whatever it is that a brand is trying to show you, delivery platform of choice. This is somebody's resource and source of truth of choice. So what are the actions that we know based on the data? What can I actually do about this? And like, I know I've made this kind of clear verbally, but these are the things that I want us to take home. Like, you should show social media to educate people on complex issues in an unintrusive way. Educate. You are all doctors here. You are all people who've pursued higher levels of education. And if not, you have the responsibility to everyone to tell everyone, show everyone the data and show it to them in a meaningful way. But it doesn't mean you have to push it down somebody's throat, but you can say, hey, interesting note about the API community in Houston is X, Y, and Z. Oh, I didn't know that. Read more here. Generally, that's a non-intrusive way to really kind of go on your social sites and show your voice, showing that you talk about what your audience would care about. Another one, social media is a great motivator for when it comes to health outcomes. I really like this piece, and like outside of being in a non-intrusive way, create kind of, and as we talk about community here, like I would look to this group to share that empathetic experience that I've hit my 10-year with cancer. And that's like something that I know immediately you all can relate and make me feel good about, right? And like that's not something everyone always can share. So like going through milestones together, going through experiences together, making it through COVID together as an example, are things that like people want to see when it comes to their health outcomes, right? Showing that the strength in that unity and community. And I think the last thing through here is like one more bit on the left side is through social media, patients feel empowered to manage their condition. Share your best practices, share what you're learning, sharing that education. Hey, learning about this, revolutionary treatment, or rather be like, Anton gets up every day and goes for a 3-mile walk. It's really helped his health. Use these communities. People are so longing to connect right now, even more than ever before. Be encouraging to one another. Educate, but be encouraged. Like, hey, how about you? We all like do a group walk together, or we all have our group snack as Susan. So, as this whole group's been provided, try to create that sense of community. We all eat together. Like, as I've seen throughout this conversation, how many times have I asked you guys to throw your thumbs up? It's because I want to make sure we all feel that sense of like engagement with one another, right? That's hard to grasp, especially in this time. We need to find ways to do that. I think the last thing, and like one thing that I on the bottom here that I really want everyone to think about more of, is there's a huge potential opportunity for healthcare companies to connect with their patients and caregivers on social media. And whether that be just being brutally honest, or whether that be actually being in the hospital, or whatever way that is, it can be one-on-one conversations we have via Zoom. That could be, hey, this is what it really looks like. This is what it's like to get, be in a hospital right now. Make all those situations a little less scary for everyone, or make everyone feel a little more connected. That means the world, right? Like, just even right now, having this interpersonal connection, looking at all of you while I speak, granted, we can't be together, but that's the next best thing. So I know you're all kind of coming into the world of Zoom. This may be the first time you guys are using it. It may be the 100th time you guys are using it, like me. But at the end of the day, like, there's a chance to fill the gap as close as possible to outside of being next to one another. And that will come from video and using these platforms to create that personal touch. So one example that I didn't list here that I would like to share is like something that you guys can do, and what I'm seeing work really well, is a lot of Zoom conferencing, like we're doing right now in small sessions. Host a Zoom live chat, right? And like, I'm sure you've all done this with your families maybe once before, but say, hey, we're gonna have an open session to talk about, say it's cancer survivorship during the COVID period. I've been to a couple of those. And yeah, we're not all together, but we all kind of make that intention. You set a Zoom meeting, you post it on your Facebook page, post it on your Twitter or your Instagram. Here's the link. And we're gonna have a healthy, open dialogue like we're doing right now. And those are the types of like personable endpoints that really, really will make the difference, because people are able to connect with one another in a place where we're at home all the time. So I just kind of wanted to show you an example by saying that, of like how you take that social media strategy, knowing where people are, connect it with what you need in the space you're in, and then have your end result. So I really wanted to spend the last back half here of time for questions and answers, but I did want to spend a little bit of time before I do that into just some really, really great examples of how groups today are using social media and advocacy in their strategies to help them advocate for specific messages. And I know I had loosely thought about doing this into breakout groups, but given the time, I'll just click into a couple, and we'll just kind of go through this, and I'll just want to show you guys some examples of exactly what I mean in the previous slides. All right, let's start here. So this was a page called "Love Has No Labels: Fight the Virus, Fight the Bias," and it really is kind of just a group that has really kind of taken this social strategy into its own and through different forms on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. They're really fighting against the bias that's been put on Asian Americans because of the coronavirus, and that was stemmed originally from China, and then as a result, Asian culture as a rule has now felt inherent bias for some certain folks, and they've kind of created a campaign around fight the virus, fight the bias. I can go a little bit more into detail, but they have stuff on their social channels. I'll go ahead and click on their Facebook link so you guys can see a little bit more of what I'm talking about, Twitter and their Instagram page. And we'll go through just to kind of show you exactly what they've been doing, right? So a little bit more. So like they'll have, and I won't spend too much time here, but like if I show you the example of like what a cross-functional, cross-platform social media strategy looks like that's successful in advocating a message, this is really it, right? They have open dialogues and open videos with either large entrepreneurs that are Asian American or people that are well known, and they just have open fireside chats and they make this available to their network and they talk about the issues at hand. They have certain videos about like what people are feeling and like certain sentiments they feel about being Asian American in the States and the racial biases they're feeling. They have little bits and photos and engaging bits that speak to their message. That's on Facebook, and they have really good engagement. They have over 252,000 people who follow them. That's an example of what I mean by, hey, just get that genuine message across. This is speaking, they're not telling Melissa nor Jackie what to say in this video. They're rather just saying, have a conversation about what it's like to be Asian American in the United States. It's the same thing you guys can do on your page. Another example here is their Twitter, right? They retweet just powerful campaigns that they're working on. They have a couple pieces on multimedia. They have a couple articles here as well. They reply to their Twitters with every tweet they get, they reply to, which is super important, meaning they actually respond to their users. They have, again, all their multimedia and their video to make sure their messages are clear. And this is another perfect example of what I mean. They respond, right? So if somebody says, crucial, thank you so much for sharing this video, they will respond as being like kind of the holder of the company and saying, hey, thank you for your message back to us, Natasha, that means a lot, right? They don't let anyone go and not felt unheard, because at the end of the day, they want to make sure everyone feels like they're people as well. And then the last bit here is like their Instagram page, right? So you're going to see they have different videos, different quotes from people that they really, that kind of get behind their message. What are they have interactive questions. What are the most important values you want to pass down to your generation? Encouraging engagement and creating the community, right? Photos of followers, all sorts of things, right? These are just kind of those kind of constant bits of engagement that all fight back to their advocating message of, hey, look, love should have no labels. We should never be biased against anyone. And my point here is not to say like, whether or not that you believe in that message or not is less of the point, but more rather, hey, here's a group that's advocating for that message, and this is the ways they're doing it. They're creating engaging conversation and community on their page. They're constantly making sure every response they give on Twitter is personable. They're posting things that are highly interactive. This is like, yeah. Oh, sorry, I don't know if anyone had a question, but this is kind of that three-pronged approach if you were to go into the area where now we know everyone is on these platforms all the time, that you create that community, you create that less of that isolating experience. You feel like people are not behind the screen all the time. And I think this is like the best example that I had of really what it means to just, again, create an advocacy and create a message via these channels that speaks true to who you are. And all of these are true to who the brand is. I think that's really what I had on that end. I had more of examples here. Actually, I'll talk a little bit more about this group. I did want to just kind of tell you guys like just a little bit more issues, and this is the one I just talked about, and I probably should have gone in that order. But really, again, their goal here is to just combat COVID like hate speech against API communities. And that is exactly what I believe they're doing, right? They're promoting good behaviors, they're creating that community. So I think that really wraps it up for me as far as like the major things. I had a couple more slides here that I'd like to skip, but I'd rather spend the rest of the time opening it up for questions and answers if that's okay with everybody else. Really, I will make sure you guys can share, and I have 4 or 5 more examples of those advocacy pieces, but would rather really kind of open this up and not have myself talk so much. So do feel free to ask me any questions around social media strategy. I know I didn't talk much about like TikTok or any of these other platforms. Happy to answer questions around there or whatever you guys might have.
So I'll start out, Anton, this is Susan.
Yeah.
So you are a novice like me.
Yes.
On social media. what's the best way to get started in the right direction? Is it, I mean, should I be, talking to an expert and having them do it? Should, what's the best way to do it?
Yeah,
And, given
absolutely.
people have limited budgets also.
No, of course. And Susan, and I'll make sure, Virgin, we can all make sure that this group gets the presentation from last year, which talks a lot more about how do we start fundraising, like how do we start this conversation from the ground up. And I think the first thing and like foremost is at least kind of developing the infrastructures at hand, right? So like if I'm a small nonprofit, right, I need to have presence. And I think you really start this, what I talked a lot today was about content strategy, what you should be posting when you start. But the first baseline is, hey, let me make a Facebook page and let me try to figure out how to make sure this thing works. Let me make a Twitter. Let me make sure I know how that works. Let me make an Instagram, pretty self, kind of inputs. Let me make sure that works. And then from there, let me find at least other members of my community that align to my message. And I know I talked a lot about that last year. I didn't want to spend too much time on it this year, but hey, let me make sure we have the communities that we feel like we're aligned and we can engage with. And that will inevitably open up like a larger circle of your following base to then help you kind of expand your circle. So I think at least from the starting point, guys, first and foremost, like I've given you a lot of tools here today about your content and like what you should be posting too. But if you're really just looking to start out, let's start out by just simply like developing the base. Get on these websites. This is where people are going, right? And like that has to be where you start. I think I may have seen a question in the chat. As a nonprofit, I'll read this question from Anisha. Thank you. You guys also feel free to write questions in the chat and I'm happy to talk through those. So Anisha, thank you for your question. As a nonprofit, fundraising is a very important goal for us, so we have enough resources to provide for our communities. Do you have any suggestions for launching fundraisers or online via social media and campaigns like that? Absolutely, it's a great question. I can say I have twofold personal experience from doing this for a number of cancer initiatives that I've fundraised for. There are a number of ways to do it, and I think the first thing that I want to reiterate, guys, is when you think about fundraising, it's always coming from that message of authenticity, telling your story and telling why that's valuable to you. I think always a video will always be a little more impactful and powerful. Hearing the voice, hearing the speech, seeing the tones. If we can't do that in person, you have to make that happen online. And like we know nowadays, people are watching more content than ever. People are watching the videos that are getting posted. So sit down, you can put yourself in a nice presentation. Hi, my name is this person, or whatever you need to do for this nonprofit. I need to raise this money. I'm raising this money for X and Y. Let me tell you a little bit more about my story. And you post that around and you never know what will blow up. And like, for example, I remember watching last year. There's a kid, probably no younger or no older than myself. And his father's Filipino, like me, sorry. But he told us a story on TikTok about how his dad is struggling to keep a donut shop open in Houston. And it was their American dream. They moved here, they opened the donut shop, but no one's coming in, and it made him really sad. Posted the video on social media, and it gained traction enough to the point where they raised like well over $500,000 a day. Now, that's not saying that's going to how it happened, but when we think about content strategy and what we just talked about, being authentic, being true, making sure people can feel that is really a key, right, Anisha? So in this case, like, really like, hey, send your message, make sure people hear you, and people can relate when they hear you speak. And I think that might be the key here in this personal day and age. Of course.
And I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, given this group, okay, see, we have about 40 people, okay? Will you recommend any type of social media we can use, which means after this catch training, we still able to connect with each other using the social media form? I know in Chinese community, we use WeChat a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, for very successful online support group, okay? People share, anything, okay? For example, cancer support group, we have several different cancer support group using the WeChat. And I found out that's very effective to share information, to continue the dialogue and help each other, okay? So for this group, for example, this group, okay, because I would like to see if we can, I hope everyone has the same thought too, continue after the training, we still be able to share the best practice, the best information or anything, you know. So any social medias, the one you just presented today, would be the best for us to use.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a good pulse check. I mean, trying with a matter of keeping this group engaged,
Yes.
I'm going to ask everyone to use their thumbs up right now. How many of you would say that Facebook Messenger is your go-to form of communication for messaging currently? Mix. Okay. So about quarter. How many of you would say it's iMessage on Apple? Yeah, or Android, your messaging, your primary messaging device on your phone. Mix. Okay. Is it another one? Is there a third? And if that's the case, please put your thumbs up now. Is that WhatsApp or something else?
Yeah.
Interesting. There you go. So we're all over the place. Let me ask a better question, and this will help us dial this down. How many of you would say, like, for a large group like this, Facebook Messenger would be the optimal way to communicate because of the way notifications are given and the fact that we all kind of have it? Thumbs up, no, yes, no, maybe. Thumbs up, okay, I see it from Barbara, maybe, yep, June, Maya, okay. Personally, I think that's probably pretty good. I'm getting more thumbs up as I go. I like that. I think given that everyone is on different platforms, Virgin, and everyone uses either an iPhone or an Android, and those texts come up all the time, so it can be a little invasive. I think Facebook is definitely a mechanism where you see larger groups kind of chat. You can kind of keep that away, but as a thing you check every once in a while, it's still highly interactive and a good way to share sources. I know I do that with my very, very, very large Filipino family of about 80 people, and I check it every once in a while, but it's not every day in my face in the same way. So I would say, like, given that everyone seems to be on Facebook, that might be the best mechanism for us to stay engaged with one another.
Okay, so this is a great proposal. So if anybody can create a Facebook messaging, the group for us, that's a $500 proposal. That's
Right
a very good one.
I like that.
Because I'm not familiar with the Facebook. So if anybody in this group can help us, you know, just write it down and apply it for next week, which is $500. Yeah.
I love that. All right. Well, a couple more. Virgin, I'll get back to you with that $500 proposal. Maybe I'll get it to 1,000. But Susan asks, with so many messages out there online, especially now, what's the next part here? Oh, sorry. What strategies can community-based orgs do to get their messages, videos noticed? That's a really good question. I think at the end of the day, with like community advocacy and that same type of work, it really starts at like the grassroots and moves its way up, right? And like we've talked a little bit about that today and in the previous conversation, but like having, I guess the question really is like, okay, I've hit this point, I have enough people sharing it, how can I get to that next level and that next level of audiences, right? And I think there's a lot of use, and I did this in my other presentation last year, but there's use of like ability to use hashtags to your advantage, right? There are ways of kind of tagging into other strategies, and I'd be happy to talk about that, kind of geared the conversation a little bit differently this year. But hey, for example, let's say I am one who's struggling with cancer. There's somebody in Pennsylvania with the exact same ordeal. We both use the hashtag, let's say cancer survivor, and we'll end up in the same thread, or we'll find others who are linked to the same disease. This has become a massive way for others to form community online, is the hashtag. So like if you guys are familiar on Facebook, this is huge for COVID. That's how people are gathering these wealths of information. I do have a couple slides in there from last year that we can share. But Susan, I think the starting point is a hashtag. I think there's also tons of great communities on Facebook, right? So if we were to go on Facebook right now and look up, say, like cancer survivors, you could find tons of communities of people who are already out there who can help get your message across. So even though it's not, let's say, like that big campaign with a huge budget, you don't need that big campaign with a huge budget. Just a matter of like finding the infrastructures of small people to help you get your message across. And that really just starts by utilizing these platforms to your advantage. And I think that's one way to do it. Got it. Okay. Thank you, Susan, for that context as well. Now I know. Well, I'll be sure to share the presentation, guys, from last year, from 2019. Susan, if that's okay. We talked a lot more last year about, and that was my miss, but a lot more about how to use social media exactly. This one was a lot more on, like, given that it's COVID, how do we shift that strategy? So hopefully that answers your question as far as, like, how do we tackle, like, as a small org, how do I go out there and get it? I mean, kind of go get to the next degree. You find others that exist out there. This community of the online space is all of us, not just me, not just you. It's just a matter of connecting, and a lot of people can. And it's actually quite it's odd at first because you're not really connecting in the same way, but it's just as evident as you walk outside and you meet someone. So, awesome question. Thank you, Susan. Lisa asks, reaching a younger audience for DCCC in Dallas has been challenged. We have Facebook, WeChat line, etc., but have not seen it suggest reaching younger people. Any advice? Looking to other platform, it has to be the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Lisa, question back to you. When you're saying younger audience or young people, are you talking people my age, younger? Just kind of curious.
Yeah, people like your age.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. I appreciate the question, Lisa. Thank you. And I think if we refer back to that Hootsuite a couple slides above, we can kind of get a better sense of where people are and what people are engaging with. And I think the hard part really here is, like, developing an interactive strategy of, like, getting people involved with maybe something that, like, content-wise, they're not always so relatable to, right? Folks younger than myself are very focused in things, in consumerism and other forms of interests. But I think as you think about creating a message and attracting more to the younger audience, it's going to be a lot more about putting out more multimedia. Lisa, I think that'd be your answer to you. More videos, more content that's a bit more interactive, a little more personable, right? I mean, like, at the end of the day, I'm sure, like, I could type out a message, but me actually giving it, you can get my ethos, and people want to relate, right? Especially at my age, we've all been behind our screen our whole life since, like, a lot of us, like, I'm at that Gen Z right there at the border, but we grew up with a phone, and we can hide behind the phone. But it doesn't mean we don't want that same personal connection, right? And posting a message on Facebook is great, but posting a video where you're really relating or getting out there, that really takes you to the next level. Saying, oh, I now see what they're really working for, or, oh, I know what that message is going to, right? So I'm hopeful for you in that regard. Like, there's no crazy direct strategy here, at least that I know of. Of course, you can get to the other platforms, but the most effective mechanism you can use that exists today is, like, hey, I'm going to make a video, or, hey, look, like, I'm going to make the screen feel more real, right? Like we're doing right now. Make it feel like I'm actually there with you.
Can I use an example like nutrition, exercise, diet? Those are all important for young people, but young people seem to be invincible. You know, so give me an example, just think creatively, how would you do it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple of good ways right off the bat. It's, I think they're really good multimedia forms of documentary, like kind of editing or work you can do, right? And like, it's very simple. Like, take, for example, what I just presented to you in regards to, did you know, right? Like, did you know this about social media, or did you know your user base is here in X, Y, and Z, right? And in a very small video, you can be like, hey, great that you're, you know, staying at home and eating all the sugary food and ordering fast food all the time. Did you know that 80% of folks who do this over their lifespan will, you know, their life expectancy is cut in half if you continue to eat that way. And like, as simple as the way you deliver the message is what my point is, will be the key, as opposed to just writing it out, right? So if I'm thinking creatively around health, right, in the same sense, I would say like, hey, you can kind of create a couple slides and have someone narrate it to it, like me. Like, hey, great that you're, at home doing this right now. Awesome. But do you know how many calories you could burn if you just step outside and took a 3-mile walk every day? If all the kids my age are concerned with image, right? I mean, there are ways to do it. Or did you know if you didn't drink that Coca-Cola day, how many calories you're saving, right? I mean, there are definitely ways you can do that, but what I would encourage you to do is think about the mechanism of delivering that message. Writing it does not really get it done. You want to keep everyone interactive. You can see that's the reason these apps like Instagram are blowing up. People like to look at things. People like to listen to people. Spotify, all these different forms of audio will continue to blow up because people like to listen. So I would say that that's an example. I'm glad that one made sense. This one's good. So how do we deal with the haters? Should we even try? Social media actually scares me because of all the negativity out there. People seem to criticize even the most sincere posts. Yeah, really good point. Couple ways here. If you guys have that person who's just on your back and won't get off, there are a couple ways. I've seen it go both ways. So one, just noise. You're inevitably going to see that. If you're genuine to who you are and genuine to your message, you can ask them to leave the group politely, or actually, if you have some power, you can actually kick them out themselves. Second, you should have supportive people in your group that will tell them this is not the space for them. And thirdly, I've seen a lot of people be very satirical back, Susan, actually, where in this case, it's like you make a funny comment back to them and just take it as is. Like you said, some people, it's the world we live in. We are always going to have critics to anything you do. So I think the best you can show that you're laughing it off or just kind of being, ignorance bliss in some sense now is the best thing forward.
Okay, do we have any more questions for Anton? All right, Anton, you are awesome as always. I know if people have questions, we can send them to you and you'll get back to us. And please do share your presentation from last year because that has a lot of good information for the folks that weren't in Houston with us.
Absolutely. I have that actually available at my fingertips. Great world we live in. So, hey guys, this one again, wanted to thank you so much for your patience and your time. I hope I didn't bore you all too many statistics, but
oh my God.
I will share some of this from last year, just on a little bit more on mechanisms of actually engaging. That was cool a year ago. So we will definitely talk soon, and thank you again.
Thank you, Anton.
Thanks, guys.